tracking financial instruments, and then in this video lecture we're going to be focusing on when financial assets are modified and when they derecognized. Okay, so the objectives of this lecture fall under recognition and measurement of financial instruments, and we're going to be focusing on modification and derecognition, like I said. Presentation and disclosure are things that I would expect you to then go look at yourself, or go to your standards, look at how you need to present and disclose financial instruments, and then go to grab and look for some financial statements to just look at how they actually disclose. Okay, so when should we derecognize a financial asset? So financial asset is derecognized when and only when the contractual rights to the cash flows of the financial asset expire, or transfers the financial asset as set out in para 3.2.4 of IFRS 9 and 3.2.5, and the transfer qualifies for derecognition in accordance with para 3.2.6. So I'd like you to go to these parts in your standard and just look at them. So the main issues that has the contractual right to cash flows expired, or has there been a transfer that results in derecognition of an asset? What we're effectively saying is you've sold the financial asset or sold the contractual rights to receive cash from the financial asset. So now, how do you know whether you have transferred the contractual rights to receive cash? So this is basically trying to have a where you have transferred, right? So how do you know that you have sold the financial asset and not just lent it to someone? So the main question to ask is whether substantial risks and rewards of ownership have been transferred. So if risks and rewards of ownership have been transferred, confirm you no longer control the financial asset, and you can't say that it belongs to you. So if you're then not sure, like I was saying, I was referring to control, you need to ask yourself, as control passed, does the buyer have the ability to sell the financial asset? If they do, it therefore means that you have actually transferred the financial asset in a way that leads to derecognition. So when you transfer a financial asset, you could have retained substantially all risks and rewards of ownership, or transferred substantially all risks and rewards of ownership. So if you have retained risks and rewards of ownership, you do not derecognize, but if you have transferred substantially all the risks and rewards of ownership, you derecognize the financial asset. So what happened if you've neither retained nor transferred substantially all risks and rewards of ownership? Remember, I said you go to the second question where you ask yourself, has the entity transferred the control? Does the buyer have the right to sell the financial asset? Okay, so risks, you're saying maybe there's something that could potentially decrease your cash flows and returns. You're exposed to variable returns. And then rewards, you're saying something that will probably increase your cash flows, and you have rights to variable returns. So the 3.2.6 that I was referring you to says, when an entity transfers a financial asset, it shall evaluate the extent to which it retains the risks and rewards of ownership. Because we're saying if you have the risks and rewards of ownership, the asset still belongs to you. And then the transfer of risks and rewards is evaluated by comparing the entity's exposure before and after the transfer, with the variability in the amount and timing of the net cash flows of the transferred asset. So remember, we're saying we looked at risks and rewards, and we're saying with your risk, you're exposed to loss of potential, decrease or loss in potential cash flows, and with your rewards, you have a right to an increase or decrease in potential cash flows. So knowing the variability in your cash flows before and after the transfer will actually help in assessing whether risks and rewards of transfer have actually been transferred when you transfer a financial asset. Okay, so your B 3.2.4 gives you examples of situations where you can say, I've transferred substantially all the risks and rewards of ownership. So if there's an unconditional sale of a financial asset, so you own an asset and then you sell it to someone with no conditions attached, confirm now you're not actually exposed to any risks and rewards of ownership. The buyer is the one who now bears those risks and rewards of ownership. So in that case, you've transferred substantially all risks and rewards. A sale of a financial asset together with an option to repurchase the financial asset at its fair value at the time of repurchase. So the moment that you have an option to repurchase at fair value, you have essentially sold the asset and you're then buying it back at a future date, given that the value at which you're actually buying it, right? And then another example is a sale of a financial asset together with a put or call option that is deeply out of the money. The moment it's out of the money, it means there's no likelihood that you're going to exercise, which therefore means that you've substantially transferred all risks and rewards of ownership. There's no way that you're going to exercise that put or call option. So 3.2.9 guides you in determining whether the seller has retained control, and if the transferee has practical ability to sell the asset in its entirety to an unrelated third party and is able to exercise the ability unilaterally and without needing to impose additional restrictions on transfer, the entity has not retained control. So we're basically saying that the moment you sell to someone and the person you've sold to has the right to sell the entire asset without consulting with you, they basically have control. So let's look at the effect of derecognition on your profit or loss. So when you derecognize a financial asset, the difference between your carrying amount and the consideration received shall be recognized in profit or loss as a gain or a loss on disposal of the financial asset. So can you see this is a paragraph that is actually in your standard. So if you ever feel stuck during a test or exam, make sure that you know where to refer to. So make sure you're flagging your standard as we're going through this recording. Okay, so let's go through an example where we look at should we derecognize the financial asset or not. So we have Moku, which has trade receivables of 20 million owing from a single customer. Following a dispute between Moku and this customer, the court rules that the customer no longer has the obligation to pay Moku. So Moku had trade receivables worth 20 million, and then a dispute arises between Moku and the customer who owes 20 million. So they go to court and the court decides that the customer no longer owes Moku. So now your issue is, should you actually derecognize? So with derecognition, what did we say? So I want you to be applying the principles that we actually were talking about earlier. So there's an issue of has the right to receive contractual cash flows expired or have been transferred. And in this case, we can say that the right to the 20 million has expired. So if it has expired, it therefore means that Moku needs to derecognize the data, right? And then let's go to example 2, where we say Moku has trade receivables of 20 million owing from a number of customers, and Moku decides to securitize these trade receivables by selling them to Zimbabwe Commercial Bank without recourse for a lump sum payment of 18.2 million. Data's collection will now be the responsibility of ZCB. So I'm sure at this stage you know what it means to securitize your trade receivables. Now it's also, and I'm sure you know what it means when you transfer your trade receivables with recourse and without recourse, right? So in this case, has the right to the debtors expired, or has the right been transferred to ZCB? Right. So in this case, the right has been transferred. So we need to then get on to applying whether the transfer substantially transfers all risks and rewards of ownership, since it's without recourse. So Moku is not liable for any amounts that have not been collected by ZCB, and ZCB will now collect the data itself. So in this case, we can say Moku is truly no longer a party to the contract and should therefore derecognize the data. So I'm sure you're picking out two important things here. In the first example, the right to the trade receivables had expired, but in this case, the right had been transferred. Where there is transfer, I'm sure you've taken note of the fact that you need to actually assess whether the risks and rewards of ownership have been transferred. And given that the transfer is without recourse, it means risk and rewards of ownership have been transferred, as if debtors don't actually pay, Moku is not liable. ZCB is the one that is actually exposed to that, which therefore means that ZCB now holds this financial asset and Moku needs to derecognize it. So you also then need to look at if they were securitized with recourse, which therefore means that should any amounts not be collected by ZCB, they would go back to Moku and request them to pay that amount, right? So in this case, so in a case where you transfer with recourse, can you see that Moku is actually exposed to the risks and rewards of ownership of the trade receivables, as ZCB may go and claim amounts not collected from Moku, which therefore means that Moku essentially still controls the trade receivables. Okay, so you have modifications in your scope, and they are at awareness level. So the main issue here that I want you to deal with is to just have an appreciation of when you can say that, you know what, my financial asset has been modified. So it's probably when the terms have been renegotiated and there's been a change in your contractual cash flows. I want you to just go look at an example in the module and see how you can say, oh, this financial asset has been modified. So it could be a change in your coupon, your contractual cash flows. Sometimes your effective interest actually changes, and in other cases it doesn't. It's just your cash flows that change. So those are your modifications, and they're at awareness level, which means you just need to know about them. Okay, thank you for your time. I hope this recording was helpful.